I want to quickly preface this video by saying all gameplay used is from the game of Kratos and BT Cool 213. They've made some banner playthroughs plus series that I cannot recommend enough if you want to see the entire game played. They really helped me explain my points and experience with this beloved title, so they will be linked in the description below. Anyways, let's get on with the video. So I recently got myself a PS3 that is both backwards compatible with PS1 and PS2 games to go on a journey that no Zoomer has gone before, and that's back in time to relive what made gaming today. I grew up with over the hedge of the game, Minecraft and Mini Ninjas, so to say the least, I was completely impartial to the God of War series until I realised the first game after buying it is, no pun intended, absolutely god tier. And today, I'll be unpacking the game from its standalone story, gameplay, development, what made it unique, and especially my time with it. Sit back, relax, and let me bring you on either a nostalgia trip or journey through a game lost to time and only coming back with its newer games. I will fair warn that the rest of this video will basically describe the whole of God of War 1 in its entirety, so a major spoiler warning ahead if you haven't played it. But then again, the game did release in 2005, so get on it. Kratos starts his journey born from the mother Callisto and not so raised by his father Zeus. He was among his peers one of the few to survive, as the weak would be essentially thrown away to the hills and not expected to live. He grew to become a Spartan warrior that led an army of his brethren which grew to tens, hundreds and thousands, all inspired and motivated by their powerful leader. However, once Kratos and the Spartans met the barbarians, things were not as spicy even in their thousands. Now, finally they had met a worthy opponent, but it was not long before they realised the barbarian troop was not just an equal, but better, as the Spartans fell in numbers and Kratos finally fallen to their leader. As the final strike was about to hit the big man himself, he screamed out to Ares, the god of war, wishing for the strength to defeat his enemies, which in return Kratos will give up his life to the god of war. Ares heard the cries of Kratos and came down, exploding, breaking and setting alight to the many of the barbarians, as well as giving Kratos the power to defeat the leader, with the blades of chaos forged by the pits of Hades and seared to his arms. Finally giving Kratos the power to defeat all of his enemies, he succeeded that thought and killed the barbarian leader to finally become Ares' new servant. Kratos trained to become the Chad of Greece and killed everyone and everything in his path. He destroyed armies like a normal Tuesday afternoon and took down villages that at all spoke against the god of war Ares or worshipped the god Athena. There was one town hall, however, that sent shivers down his spine with his intuition and an old woman warning him of going in, which he refused to listen to neither, as per usual. Kratos stormed in and not one soul left that hall unscathed, which included the death of his wife and daughter, the only two in this world he sought to protect. This was a trick played by Ares as a final initiation of becoming his disciple, and rightfully so. Kratos did not take kindly to this and raged on, hoping, praying for the day that he could take revenge for what Ares had taken away from him. But leaving the hall, the old oracle cursed Kratos to wear the ashes of his family as a constant reminder to all that he fought and himself of his tragedy that he produced single-handedly. Kratos, realising his sins, renounces his worship to the god of war Ares and for 10 years chilled the hell out and served the other gods to be forgiven. However, as these years pass, Athena's city, Athens, becomes under attack by Ares, and Kratos was called to help out because, well, guess what? He's quite good at killing. So, this is where you, the player, start your journey. You, as Kratos, try to save Athens from Ares' siege by battling hordes of the undead like the first real boss, Hydra, while you're on your journey to the city. This is where you can really feel how retro this game is, as the button mashing is like no other, and honestly it's endearing and badass. As I did my playthrough on hard, so my opinion here is purely from a pain standpoint. Anyways, you of course start out using the Blades of Chaos, which have mega range, which you can do some mega cool combos with. The overall conception is that you can press triangle for a heavy attack and square for a normal attack. In time you do unlock the ability to use a circle as a slam and X as an upward hit to send your enemies higher than a kite. Anyways, without getting too far ahead, you essentially battle these hordes and face your first mini-boss battle, and that's one of the Hydra's heads that come bursting into your broken ship. I do have to mention that there's not a lot of depth into this first fight, it could basically just be broken down to block attack, block attack, block attack, quick time event to whittle down this guy's health, and that's about it. But you do find him along your journey, and honestly it's a great introduction to the world of Greek mythology. As you plow your way through these battles, you obtain red orbs that are like this game's currency for power-ups for each of your weapons and abilities. There are also blue orbs which fill up a magic stamina meter so that you can essentially cast some godly spells that I'll get onto later, and green orbs which are for your health. But most importantly, there are also gorgon eyes and feathers you can collect from chests that you need throughout your journey. After collecting 6 gorgon eyes, you can increase your max health, and or after collecting 6 feathers, you can also increase your max stamina. This game's difficulty scaling is so well done that honestly, it'll be incredibly tricky to play the game without it. I should mention again that I played on hard, so my experience is that of pain. So to help with that, Poseidon himself comes to give you the first of your special abilities, and that's Poseidon's Rage, which after selecting it with your D-pads sends a lightning strike around you that yeets all enemies, and it's great. Like said previously, you can upgrade this by investing red orbs into it, which is another aspect of the game I didn't think would work, but it does. For instance, you can essentially put half your red orbs into your blades and your Poseidon's Rage instead of having enough to spend on the power up and then getting it. It's like an extra step in the upgrading process that wasn't really needed but appreciated, as you can work towards your upgrades without having the certain amount of orbs to then unlock. But one thing that should be duly noted and obvious from gameplay is that I have no control over the camera, and instead my right analog stick is for dashing / rolling away or toward shite. Personally, this was such a good decision because honestly, having to move around the camera around these environments would have been nigh on impossible to keep up with the action. There are so many instances of this, and one I can specifically remember is when you're climbing up a ladder and the camera pans out to include a corpse hung over a pole, or when bouncing from a vine to vine you can see the undead and Greece soldiers battling in the town of Athens. These are such sick scenes that I would not want to spoil every one because there won't be enough time in this video to show, but goddamn, if you have the time to play this, do it now. Which is a great introduction into your first boss fight that the different Hydra heads have been leading you to. Your main job as Kratos is to watch everyone be decimated by the 2 other heads that you must defeat before heading up the pillar to the lookout post to have a shot at decapitating the main dipstick. A common theme in this game is the retro beat 'em up, so when it comes to diversifying attacks, there isn't much this early on where you haven't unlocked even 25% of the specials, so you lay into the other 2 Hydra heads with heavy and normal attacks to a point where you can stun them long enough for a conveniently placed spike to hammer into their heads with a little convincing from your part. Once these fellas are out for the count, you can make your way up to the screeching banshee of a Hydra head that you will have to brunt until it attempts to attack you so that you can attack it. Which these windups are long, so there's plenty of time to get in your hit. Either that or the Hydra head again screeches, which you need to block so that you don't fall down the sail and have to climb back up. After hitting the head enough, it'll get stunned into a quick time event so that you as Kratos can smash their head into the sail to break it off piece by piece, because my guy is healing and needs more than just Kratos' blades. Once the sail has been broken off in half and jagged, you can then do one final quick time event to pull the main head of the Hydra down into its spike and yeet its frontal lobe so that it crashes down onto the deck where your first major boss fight will end. It's a great introduction into the game without a shadow of a doubt. However, I'd much rather the other 2 Hydra heads be more involved in the main fight instead of gatekeeping it. Like some parkour or movement patterns you need to remember to have time to break down the sail, which ultimately isn't a huge issue, as this is purely speaking from a modernized gaming standpoint, and knowing how good the boss fights later in the game become. However, it still lives up to a great first boss to get the player used to different attacks, which leads on to how you progress on with the level, as you need a key which was swallowed with the captain earlier by the main Hydra head. So, Kratos and you make the smooth and slippery journey down the throat of this beast, was holding on to dear God, thinking that Kratos was there to save him, and then was let go in favour of the key. I can see how Kratos gets his great reputation. But with this key, you can make it out of the Hydra head and travel your way up back to the door you stumbled upon earlier in the playthrough to open up the next part of the story, which is your main journey into Athens, where you get to meet Athena. As you're shown, the gods will promise Kratos the ability to forget what he had committed and will be forgiven if he saves Athens, which by this point you as the player have your work cut out, as there are enemies galore which progress in difficulty as you make it through the game. For me to go through each and every enemy, I could not give them enough credit where credit is due, so I'll be speaking of the ones which caught my attention the most as I go on with the gameplay. When making your way up to the main village from your ship, you're greeted with your first big enemies, which are the Minotaurs and Cyclopses. These guys are fun as hell to fight, as they're damage sponges that in this game's retro feel can be killed with a quick time event that is brutal, like either spamming circle to push your blade down into the Minotaur's mouth, or doing a specific combo of buttons to essentially stick your blade up the head or ass of a Cyclops. But what I love is the rounds of enemies you have to fight, so it's not just one of these guys, but could be multiple, with loads of Minotaurs and undead, to really keep the action going. However, this can become overwhelming as hell to deal with, by which point you'd be able to drown some of your points into the Blades of Chaos, so that you can upgrade them to level 2 and gain the Rage of the Gods. This is vital for the rest of your gameplay, as essentially Kratos can go Super Saiyan and deal a bunch more damage and reach further with the blades. You can only use this ability a handful of times, once you've gained some sort of experience through fighting hordes of enemies, but will make these fights significantly easier when the time is right. However, this is only used sparingly, so another unique way to deal with guys much bigger than you, and that could weed out them even further, is the power of Medusa's gaze, that when you come across Aphrodite, she can give you, if you kill Medusa, the queen of the Gorgons, and bring her head. Medusa is not fun to fight, as she can essentially turn you to stone and you've got a small window to mash your way out of being a weeping angel, or she'll one-shot you. This even applies to other enemies that hit you whilst you're stone, so this is a state of being you do not want to be in, because Medusa may give you some time to get out, however other guys won't, and I've been caught out more than once being shot by an archer from miles away. But the best part is the finisher on Medusa, as it's again gory when you rip her head off with moving the left analog stick in patterns like you're actually trying to twist the head off a human being. Honestly, this game is a huge breath of fresh air, as it's actually going that extra mile with that 18+ rating. And with that 18+ rating also comes with Medusas and most, if not all females, having like full nip out, which I can appreciate adds to the animalistic nature of these polygon fools, which the developers themselves wanted. Even in the extras, other male enemies were designed to even have schlongs, but was scrapped, which I would not have minded. Okay, I think we can add that back in. Anyways, before YouTube takes me down, there's hardly no handholding in the puzzles you work to figure out, as there are no hints, and when the difficulty actually has hard in the title, imagine it actually meaning it, because there's a goddamn achievement that is getting my ass kicked when you die too many times. Screw this game, I had no health going into that. Like for instance of a challenge, there are these 2D climbing sections where you have to climb a wall or along a rope that other undead will be on, and you still have to fight. These sections were quite fun, but the only problem is that you do have to button mash until one guy dies faster than the other before they start hitting you and cancelling your wind-ups. I just resorted to continually throwing the guys off the walls or ropes, as well as spam left and right to kick them so that I wasn't going to get yeeted. Honestly, that's one part of the game that I didn't feel was as fleshed out. Using my blades on the rope sections at least did not really feel satisfying and or useful, because enemies could just cancel my attack from behind me. But at least getting into these sections were fun, as the game really promotes exploration. Because the camera is set to one angle, there are so many times that if you didn't explore a corner, you could not have gotten a room full of red orbs, gorgon eyes, feathers, etc. that could help you to fight these enemies. I remember specifically a funny moment where I was climbing down a rope set out for me after beating a challenge room that had its floor yeeted if you didn't beat it quick enough, that I was like, do you know what, I'm just gonna go up instead. And bam, 2 chests full of red orbs. It was like I was on the same wavelength as the developers. It should be noted, however, the first time you get to see Ares in this game, It's incredibly charming, as you can really see how far the developers wanted to push this game to its limits. As for PS2 hardware, I'm incredibly surprised they were able to fit so much into one level, especially having that one huge god fighting loads of little dudes. That was definitely 2D. It shows how far games have become, because when we see a background, we don't think much of it, but as tech progresses and our normal background is on the same level as Hogwarts Legacy, I took a new shine to what it could be. A dull grey background with Ares fighting to fair play to figuring out how the hell to do this. Personally, the time that Medusa's head was most useful was in a puzzle where you had to get a Minotaur to step onto a plate, stonify them to open and keep the gate open to move forward in the level. Obviously you can use Medusa's head to kill enemies quicker, but I found this puzzle to be really unique and the best way to show what the game has to offer for exploring themes and challenges. Which, whilst we were talking, Kratos was working his way through the siege, so that the next upgrade will be shown by Zeus is his Fury or Thunderbolt ability to bring long range attacking into the game. You'll instantly need this to progress, as the person stopping you from crossing a bridge is holding it closed on the other side of a chasm. It's mega useful because it's the only special attack that can take any amount of magic stamina to send out a bolt. Which, once you start progressing from here, you enter the Oracle's temple and meet two special people. One of them being the Oracle of Athens, being flown away by some bastard flying harpies that I will get onto later. But specially a gravedigger digging Kratos' grave. His origin is unknown, but there are theories of him being a part of the gods of Olympus. But nonetheless, he is dead set on a goal and hurries Kratos towards his, and that's saving Athens and the Oracle. To get to the Oracle though, you have to essentially parkour your way to the rope that she is on and basically fallen from, as the harpies left her there. Honestly, this is my most favourite part of the game, as you're essentially just going around getting some red orbs until you have to do a little bit of a timed event where you have to full on parkour your way to the rope, where she just keeps on screaming out your name whilst you're just chilling out. So, gives me some proper Spider-Man vibes, PS2 era.
What is keeping you? Athens crumbles as you waste time!
But once you eventually save the Oracle, she does actually play a quite important role, as she essentially guides Kratos toward a new goal, and that's Pandora's Temple, a faraway place holding Pandora's box that will give Kratos the true power of the gods to properly give a fighting chance against Ares, the god of war. This requires you to go on a journey through the Lost Souls Valley, where you would first meet the Sirens. This was no better place to put the girls, as the constant rushing of sand and the soothing music of a snake is terrifying, and they themselves are pretty difficult to fight, as they can actually dodge your attacks, basically meaning you gotta hit them twice as much to get the same amount of damage done, so that their soul can be given to the door to let you pass. But luckily you're not in this section full on, as then you're greeted with something much bigger, and that is Kronos, the last of the Titans, which yields Pandora's temple on his back. Cursed by Zeus to wander the sandy plains, that the constant storms would rip the skin off of his muscle as the sand pierces ever so deeper. You call Kronos from a horn deeply hummed, that he passes you with a rope dangling that you climb onto, which after 3 days of climbing, you actually get to Pandora's temple, which does not just hold the box, but a story and a mad architect like no other. After tussling with some of the toughest brutes you'll find in the game, you enter the gates of Pandora's temple to finally meet its ring. This wheel can turn to challenges that really start the end, and it was fantastic. So to congratulate us on this feat, we enter the challenge of Atlas with Artemis's blade given to us by, you guess it, Artemis herself, which is the only and last special ability that is melee. It's supposed to be a stronger version of the Blades of Chaos, but with less range and only one blade, but it's hard to say its practicality this far into the game. If you upgrade the Blades of Chaos enough, the sluggish movements of Artemis's blade is difficult to choose over. I did try and use it in a good few encounters, but because of this game's fixation on retro beat-em-ups, rightfully so, that even the sword's strength cannot really match the amount of enemies you're supposed to fight. Like for instance, in the room after obtaining the sword, there are 2 shields you must obtain with Hades' face on them, one of them being below in a chasm with tons of the undead fighting. When picking up this shield on a catwalk, the exit will close and the wall will start moving towards you to essentially crush you. In this time, you need to destroy hundreds of undead that are impossible to fight given the time and the amount, without Poseidon's range and the Blades of Chaos, responsive, swirling, long-range attacks that hit everyone to the end of their tether. But as you explore the temple and beat its many rounds, as the player you get to reveal more of the story of Pathos Venendes III, which is the person who was, quote, chief architect and loyal subject of the gods, end quote. Hopefully I said his name right, but anyways, you get to see glimpses of how he constructed this whole temple by finding skull doors that requires the head of his sons that are buried in tombs across the temple, starting with his youngest to open into the second ring closer to the middle that holds your escape that somehow is submerged in water, and has a rolling cylinder going around continually to keep Kratos and you on your toes, especially when you have to balance on said cylinder to a set of ladders going to the next challenge of Poseidon. This challenge is where you'll actually meet for the first time Cerberuses that are frustrating as hell to beat, and they're seedlings that actually have a life cycle and grow into their grown counterparts. They are tanky damage sponges that are either kicking my ass or I am with them, with the rage of the gods, so simply this is a skill issue, and honestly I did not use my Medusa's head and ability as much as I would like to with these guys, and I feel like they would be a lot more easier, but ayo, we live and learn. So let's continue on with Kratos' story and gameplay, but I want to quickly make mention of this next section which stuck out to me like a sore thumb. Kratos balancing on a wall that directly looks down on the Kronos, carrying this whole temple on his back with chains swinging from side to side is so fantastic. But what's even more fantastic is where you actually get to see where the Kratos smiling meme came from. It was in the reference to him having to sacrifice an already existing undead in a cage to a door that needed them to pass through. Honestly, my smile was just going cheek to cheek. It was just funny as hell to see Kratos just sadistically smiling at this one undead in the cage. It was great. But after this realization, you'd soon find yourself after fighting the casual thousands of undead, finding Poseidon's temple, and Trident stuck in a stone that once obtained gives Kratos the ability to breathe underwater, effectively giving him as well the ability to swim. You'll test this out basically immediately by entering a hole on the right side of the catwalk toward Poseidon's statue to a long underwater corridor that tests your ability to dash and break open walls already cracked from decay, simply to lead Kratos into a cave to open the way out of the area. This is when you as the player and Kratos as the character will encounter the first and last water section of the game, where you'll navigate the ruins of Poseidon's temple. You'll find challenges such as closing corridors of spikes when crossed from one side to the other, as well as riches, but also bitches, i.e. naiads, the children of Poseidon that are scattered for Kratos to find, and will even lead to rooms full of chests that are maxed with red orbs. Leaving this place, however, you'll find one last faithful challenge of Poseidon, that is his wife Aphrodite looking over a cursed room that only she'll know the way out. Easily enough, it's just opening the steps to her, and then in those steps is a doorway to take Kratos back to the Pandora's rings, that with the ability to breathe underwater can go into the final circle submerged in water to a hole left in the ground, leading to the challenge of Hades. That was quite the skip, but it was for good reason. You enter an open room with an overly sized door that has a graven of a minotaur and chained locked. There is also another narrow passage on the other side that is your only way forward. As you follow the passage, you'll come into a great expanse of a room that will be where you start your journey through Hades' tomb. A new long-range enemy comes shooting out of the darkened door, and that will be the Centaur. These guys, I feel, don't have enough showtime, as they're the better version of the Archer Undead, where they're tricky enough to give you a fight up close range, like their normal enemy, but don't leave you unscathed if you run away. Unless you cheese the level by staying at the entrance because their area of attack is only in that room, and get mega confused if you just sit at the doorway attacking them. But by killing 3 of these fellas in 2 demonic sigils set out in the arena, you will open the entrance of a maze made by once again Parthos Fernandez III. Your goal is to kill every enemy in this maze with traps laying around every corner to bamboozle you to dying and starting the whole thing again. In one of these rooms is actually when you can confuse the Centaurs majorly, which is funny as hell, no pun intended. However, the worst challenge of this maze out of all of them, plus being kinda scary, is at the end of the level, close to the door that you feed the souls of the damned to. There are essentially 2 hidden cheeky undead that, as a whole, isn't too difficult, but if it wasn't for the huge stone plower that extends the whole corridor, that only when it's fully put back in you can enter the hole that they are in, which then you gotta get out of that hole, which is equally nerve-wracking. However, it's for a good cause, and that's exiting the maze with the ability to pull Hades' statue out of the ground and laser beam into a corridor of rolling stones. This room is pretty bog standard for a game, as you essentially have to dodge these huge fiery stones rolling at you, but the tense part comes when you have to open each door at either side of the room. I've never button mashed so much, as it's literal seconds each time that you have to open each door to progress onto the next level, but you have no idea which one it is. Honestly, I felt bad for my controller in this game, and screw Parthos Fernandez for building this room. As you leave it, however, you encounter some of the more retro hordes of undead that you smashed your face into your controller to win, and enter the last and highest piece of the puzzle, and that's to catwalk your way over spinning blades to find both red orbs and a golden Minotaur carved door, with a ship's wheel on top to finally unlock the chains holding the door you enter the challenge of Hades looking at, but now begging to be opened with constant advances being made on said door. So when you and Kratos finally make it down to see what the hell is wanting so much to get out, you'll find one hell of a boss, and that's the overly sized Minotaur, armoured and ready to fuck you up. Pandora's Guardian has armour that shields himself and their health, which you need to break through by ramming into them with as much as you got. It'll signify that you've broken one of the layers, as the Minotaur's armor will start firing up and a quick time event will be initiated to stun them long enough so that you can get back onto a higher platform in the arena to flip a lever and send a log right at them. You'll need to repeat this sequence a few times that you can start normally hitting the Guardian's armor away with normal attacks, but his own become more varied and stronger, such as opening 4 different holes in the ground that spit lava and can stun lock you into losing half your health, plus more when he grabs you and combos you into oblivion. This is why it's much more advantageous to stay on top of the higher ledge, as you can whittle down his health and armor and only have to deal with a select few attacks that can be easily blocked beside the Minotaur grabbing you and pulling you down. This is honestly the better facing view of the fight, as you get this huge angry Minotaur just leaning over and charging at you, evidently shown with their every being that they want you dead. As you remove the armor from this beast, you get to glance at his true undead skull and muscle body underneath that you hail fire on and dodge until his health bar is low enough to stun them once more, and with a flaming log pierce them to the door that they wanted to escape, kicking a doorway for you to enter. Pandora's Guardian is one of those fights that hold up to today's standards without even being the main attraction. Honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that the fight was significantly easier on top of the higher ledge, it would have been an S tier fight, but still the whole lead up and finale of Hades' challenge come to the Minotaur is nonetheless satisfying, with the differentiation of having to whittle down his armor before you could even land a proper hit. Which leads me to what this mighty boss was protecting, and that was Venende's second and final son, as he follows religiously to the God's Gospel. This is when you even start reading that Venende starts to doubt the amount of dedication taken to build this temple, which is rightfully so when you've killed both your sons. With the last son's skull taken from Pandora's ring and you leave the spire, you meet the man this challenge was built for, Hades, as he offers you the souls of the damned as your final special ability to help the gods in fighting the god of war. This ability allows you to summon these souls that will weed out a ton of foes in one swoop. Not as effective as Poseidon's Rage, however, much more powerful, as you can one-shot enemies with each soul. So it's official, you've officially beaten Hades' challenge and gotten all of its riches. You can finally go into the middle of the ring and put the skull of the second son of Menendez to the door in the middle found in the statue. That, once opened, will drain the water, and you can finally link the crest found in an earlier room to one on the chest of Zeus by maneuvering the rings so that each door is in line and a beam can be casted out to raise the statue from the middle that leads to the Cliffs of Madness, as Pathos puts it. So, as you begin the end, this is where you'll meet my favourite enemy, the Satyrs. These hind-legged fools are much more fun to fight, as they are agile, quick, attacks that feel amazing to dodge, block and fight back against. Simply put, they are just a more complex version of the undead swordsman but require actual responsiveness to defeat, but most importantly range, so the Blades of Chaos, as per usual, are your greatest friend. Which by this point, you will definitely need any help you can get, especially in terms of friends, because as you and Kratos defeat the Satyrs and carry on, there's a book that stands after a bridge where Pathos starts writing in doubt if he has even created a way out when constructing the Cliffs of Madness. He hopes that possibly the cruel gods will give you mercy when showing you the way, as he ends the book with, quote, "once loyal subject of the gods," end quote. So, your job as Kratos is to climb the cliffs to their very peak and tackle whatever lays in front of you, which is normally a horde of undead, cyclops, harpies, gorgons, minotaurs, and now satyrs. As you climb the cliffs and solve their puzzles, you'll meet two statue heads of the gods Hera and Aphrodite that are without their necklaces. Simply put, there are two challenges that you need to complete to get these necklaces, which are completely irrelevant, and it doesn't matter how good this game is when it gives me the achievement getting my ass kicked, because there was hardly any health boxes in this level, and after getting my ass kicked already by the satyrs to leave me with a slither of health, going into a horde of enemies to get into one of the challenges where you have to play Tetris was a complete and utter piss take. That this insult was completely unjust compared to my lack of skill. That the game even asked me to go into easy mode because I'm definitely not going to take that. God damn it. Okay, so basically this bit is more than just me being mad, but is also a nod to the fact that there's support in the game to go back a difficulty level if it's getting too tough. Not many games actively promote this option, especially in the death screen, and most of the time it's something done specifically by the player later. It really does bring back the casual in gaming that even though I'm a salty zoomer and will not take it, I can at least use it as inspiration to what will eventually come. After finding and obtaining both Hera's and Aphrodite's necklaces and placing it on top of their heads, you climb the cliffs further to the next part of the level, and that is the Architect's Tomb. Laid with saws, traps, puzzles and hordes of enemies as per usual, Kratos and you as the player get to see further into the madness that was part of Menendez. After unlocking his room, you see two old bony bodies, one sitting at the head of the table and one at the foot, stained with blood. Having the opportunity to read the papers left behind, there will be the obvious rambling of a madman that, when understood, Pathos Menendez, loyal subject and architect of Pandora's temple, killed his wife as an attempt to keep his work because he thought that she was going to try and interfere. After realizing that his whole family is now gone, he then commits suicide. It's honestly sad that Pathos' work clouded his mind so much to not see how much the gods were really asking from him, such as giving his two sons and eventually wife to the temple. But it doesn't even stop there, as you have to take Pathos' head to even unlock the final door to the final room, and eventually Pandora's box that the architect was sworn to protect till the very end. So once you open this door, you will enter the final challenge of Pandora's temple, and what a fitting but most frustrating end to the madness. The music is as epic as ever in the background, that paired with a brutal scene of harpies and undead archers, with a continuously moving, rolling floor to crush us on each side, which was unkind to even standing still for a millisecond. It was a tough room to beat. However, it really showed personally how screwed the harpies' attack are, because they essentially swarm dive onto you in an explosive fashion, and it's not something you can block, but only dodge. So when there's never solid ground, that even rolling to one side can get me so close to the crushers, with archers continuously firing at me, it really challenged me as a player. My main strategy for this room was mainly just to kill the harpies as soon as they came in, so that I could possibly have a chance at killing the archers eventually, and praying to God that when I dodged a kamikaze bat, I wouldn't be too close to the Crushers, but I still cannot deny it was an epic finale to the Architect's Temple. By beating this level, you will finally meet the peak of all these challenges, and your reward, where the gods will surround Pandora's box, and Kratos, a mere mortal, will be the first to have his hands and move this massive chest of power needed to kill Ares. In this same breath, even Ares will know that Kratos has just obtained Pandora's box, that he will javelin throw a log from Athens all the way to Pandora's temple to pierce Kratos through the chest and kill him. What a way to end the journey of a guy that just beat Pandora's temple, that Ares sends out the same annoying harpies to achieve the box and send Kratos to the depths of Hades, which he will return. As Kratos falls to a river that's current can take any soul that goes into it, he grabs onto the ship's captain from where you started this journey, hanging onto a ledge that will bring you into the path of Hades, after killing him of course on your way up. This place is deadly, and all enemies found in this path of Hades, being satyrs, minotaurs, undead and harpies, will be triply as strong as they were on the surface, as well as one misstep leading you to an instant death. There are strict walkways that are constantly turning, with blades on top to keep you moving, and floating platforms that will be riddled with archers to catch you off guard. This place is truly epic, and such a great way to feel like you're coming from the pits of Hades, not that you're coming from another challenge. The part that got me the most was the climbing section, where there are spinning pillars with blades on them that you have to time to move through unless you get hit and fall all the way back down. I started getting the hang of it on my third death, however, it's something completely new to the path of Hades that I had no practice in at all, which is what makes this level on its own the peak of challenge design. Story-wise, that I could play for hours, that when you eventually get to the overworld, the enemies feel even easier, which is massively immersive to what Kratos must be feeling since starting his journey. So it's quite a welcome surprise that the gravedigger talked about earlier when we first entered Athens' palace comes to greet us as we rise from the very grave he was digging. Well, for us, he had planned this whole thing from the very beginning, and from what I've heard, this character will be explained in later games. Nonetheless, he still rushes Kratos onto his destiny. As we move through the palace, we see it's in shambles, that when we enter the same place that we saved Athena, this time around Athena's underground, telling us an unfortunate truth that Ares has fully taken over the city and is exclaiming to us that there isn't any hope. At this point, it's important to make any final upgrades to your special abilities and weapons, as you won't be having much time to do this on the fly. Let's recap on what you have obtained thus far into your journey as Kratos. You have the Blades of Chaos, which is your primary weapon given to you by Ares, the god of war. Poseidon's Rage, which will summon an area of lightning around the player. Medusa's Gaze, which will turn most enemies into stone so that you can lay into them and kill them faster. Artemis's Blade, which is the more tankier version of the Blades of Chaos without as much range. Zeus's Fury, where you can summon a lightning bolt for a ranged attack. And finally, the Army of Hades, where you can summon a ton of souls to eat any enemy, as each soul will target that enemy. You can sink whatever red orbs you've collected along your journey to upgrade these fellas a few times, which will max them out. Like for instance, most of their max levels are 3 or 4, whilst the Blades of Chaos max level is 5. These level upgrades will grant you stronger attacks like Artemis's Blade or Blades of Chaos, faster charge ups like the Zeus's Fury or Medusa's Gaze, or larger areas of damage like with Poseidon's Rage, and in most cases all of them combined when you make it up the skill tree. You'll obviously unlock as well more methods of destruction with these weapons, like you can spin the Blades of Chaos, charge Zeus's Fury for a more stronger bolt, or keep Smash and Circle whilst using Poseidon's Rage to keep the attack going for longer, and as well previously mentioned, upgrading the Blades of Chaos to obtain the God's Rage to essentially become Super Saiyan. For this last fight, I'll suggest making sure you've maxed out the Blades of Chaos, Poseidon's Rage, and the Army of Hades, as you'll understand soon enough. As we enter the same gateway that we left for our journey for Pandora's box to meet Ares, we carry on down the stairs and out the doorway to see the god of war himself, holding Pandora's box so proudly and shouting to the gods, but more importantly Zeus, for how strong his son is, taking down the city of Athena and holding such a powerful weapon to even threaten to use it. From behind, Kratos casts a thunderbolt to the chain that binds Pandora's box to the god Ares' hand, so that Kratos can open it himself and absorb the power of the gods.
After thousands of years, Pandora's box was finally opened. The power of the gods unleashed.
You are still just a mortal. Every bit as weak as the day you begged me to save your life.
I am not the same man you found that day. The monster you've created has returned to kill you.
You have no idea what a true monster is, Kratos. Your final lesson is at hand.
The final fight against Ares, the god of war, was such a fantastic fight. It was a great ending battle that was not forgiven, and it has made me work like no before. Ares' first stage is the most easiest, where he can pound you to the ground with his hammer or fling you up in the air with his sword. These attacks can be brutal, and when playing on hard, if Ares lands a good combo on you, oh wow, was it good. But he still taunts you the entire way through. Ares' attacks become more varied as you continue through his first stage, to the point where you can finally get a good grip onto him and do a faithful quick time event to stab him with his own spikes protruding from his back into him. He'll become enraged and will truly set Kratos on a path much more difficult than a fight with a god. A fight with oneself, as Ares sends Kratos into a portal leading him to that day where he killed his family. The town hall, his wife and daughter are all that is in this realm, and they are pleading for Kratos, as other, more wild versions of himself starts coming from portals dotted in the walls, and soon the most unrelenting fight will take place that will put all of the hordes you fought up to this point to shame. Your goal as Kratos is to save your wife and daughter from these otherworldly versions of yourself that will just keep on coming. These guys over time will even start possessing the powers you have, like summoning Thunderbolt, and most deadly enough, wielding Aphrodite's blade, as the town hall and ground beneath you starts falling apart to leave you with only a little bit of wiggle room to deal with an army. Personally, I had died so many times at this stage, and got to the point where I had to put it down for the night because I wasn't getting it. In the end, it's much useful to go into the fight with full magic stamina and the rage of the gods so that you can actually keep up with the many enemies that are spawning at once. One great detail, however, is that to heal your family, you must hug them, and with this move you will transfer some of your health to your wife and daughter. So once you fought up to a point that Kratos has stopped spawning, you would have beaten the stage of the fight, but the god of war is still not done with you yet. Ares is cruel, and what you're doing is actually beating him. So he takes away your most deadly weapon, and that's the Blades of Chaos, pulling them off Kratos' arms and bringing him back to the real fight, where the god of war will scold him for not joining and finally landing the killing blow, if it wasn't for Kratos realizing what the gods of Olympus had done to help with this fight. The bridge leading to the huge statue of the god Athena is a sword that, once broken off, will give Kratos another chance to take revenge. At the final stage of Ares' fight is my favourite in the entire game, as when you trade blows with the god of war, either one's health will be zapped and given to the other, so it's a constant tug of war to see who can combo the most and lose the least amount of health. This dynamic in fighting is seriously something I haven't seen before, unless indirectly from enchantments or spells, but not as prevalent as two health bars at the top going down or up until one is completely depleted. So when Kratos finally gives the final blow to Ares, it's a huge epistle about how great of a warrior Ares was trying to make out of Kratos. So when the sword finally plunges, it's all the more satisfying in an explosion created from the death of the once previous god of war. As everything settles and Kratos can once again speak with Athena to see if his sins have been forgiven, plus to rid of the memories that haunt him, she only confirms that Kratos is forgiven by the gods, but not by any stretch of the imagination can they or Kratos forget about the awful deeds he has done. Finally broken, Kratos goes to the cliffs overlooking the Aegean Sea that he fought Ares, and wishes his final farewells on this earth, as he cannot live with himself no longer. I never knew this meme of Kratos fallen was so tragic. and this man has been broken in the journey to fight Ares, that him falling off this cliff wasn't just him going to another location because he's a god and can fly for some odd reason, but him just plunging into the sea to meet a demise set by himself. However, the gods of Olympus have another purpose for Kratos that needs him to be alive. So by lifting his body from the sunken sea and soul he was experiencing, the gods of Olympus, through Athena, offer him a place at the seat where the previous god of war sat. Kratos enters a door that leads him directly to the stairs of Mount Olympus, where he enters the golden palace, and there right before him stand two statues, one of the god of Ares and one of the carcass that was Pandora's guardian. But one more thing stands before Kratos and you as the player, which is the throne where the new god of war will sit, and will oversee any and all battles that come, either that be for good or evil. Kratos' journey will be told for centuries, as motivation for those in war that a mortal can become a god. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself with this title despite its age, as it was released in 2004 but began development in 2002 by Santa Monica Studios under the lead director David Yaffa, which this 2-year time frame is personally unheard of. Like the 2018 God of War taking double that amount of development, i.e. 4 years, but still, compared to games nowadays, it can keep its own massively. The best part is that it's so obvious David Yaffa and the Santa Monica team really wanted to make the best out of God of War, as he literally says he wanted to make the game, unquote, out of passion, not fear, and that it would be a game that Yaffa, as a game player, would play, unquote. Which shows in the reviews at the time, like for instance Metacritic reviewing God of War to be a 94 out of 100, or IGN rating the title 9.8 out of 10. The mix of Greek mythology and an arcade beat 'em up make for a casual fun experience where you get to learn about the different gods along the way. But if I had to choose why this game isn't a full 10 out of 10, it's that the underwater section I feel wasn't as fleshed out as I feel it could have been. In the grand scheme of things, Kratos was supposed to be above ground fighting to save Athena, but the lack of anything beside a few traps, naiads and an escape room leave a lot to be desired. Especially after starting the game in a sinking ship, water in God of War 1 could have been a real big asset to conveying that Kratos is treading in deep waters, pun intended, with the gods and Ares. Even being able to add a breathing system before you obtain Poseidon's trident would have been a great start, as it's only after gaining the ability to breathe underwater that you can swim. So for example, you can scare the player into realizing that they can't breathe underwater as Kratos slowly loses health and you can hear like a choking sound after a certain amount of time when deep diving into a chasm intended for the next section. It would have been emphasized, in my opinion, your main weakness as the mortal Kratos, that once you obtain the ability to breathe underwater, you feel that much more powerful. It's such a small issue that it's because the game is so optimized I can even notice it. However, the cherry on top for this whole title would be to have, similar to the Sirens, the Naiads turning on Kratos and start chasing him down the corridors, that you had to kill them quickly before they dragged you away. That would be really cool. However, I do understand that the Santa Monica team were really experiencing crunch when it came to their release date for this game, and to keep things streamlined, they kept most enemies to the surface because I could only imagine how annoying it would have been to add a swimming cycle to each and every enemy. But the one part I hate about this game is that Kratos wasn't a fat adult Cupid. One key thing that stood out to me was that in the extras, you can actually see the other character designs for Kratos in the beginning. There was a guy with dreadlocks that seemed so badass in his own right. That would have been really, really cool. Plus a normal looking warrior dude, which I can completely understand needed some rework. And then obviously the man himself, Kratos, but instead with dark blue stripes instead of his famous red. I believe David Yaffa didn't want to conform to this mainstream red because they were already designing each and every character to be animalistic in their own nature, which is why you see females with full nips, enemies crawling or sporadically dancing around. David just wanted Kratos to still be unique, which is funny because when testing the mechanics in the beginning, they had used a fat man in a diaper with wings as a playable character or acting as Kratos. Jesus, imagine if this was the true God of War, goddamn Cupid. But Jesus Christ, this video is big, so I'm gonna end it there. I've really enjoyed my time making it, and if you enjoyed my structured ramble, then don't forget to like the video and subscribe. To leave you a TLDR though, if you just skip to the end, here's a quote from one of the developers.
You should play God of War because it'll get you laid. God of War is fucking rad.